All right, welcome to today's Lead Generation World podcast. My name's Mike Faree. Thanks for joining me again today. We've got all kinds of podcasts sort of lined up for the next couple weeks, and I hope you guys are enjoying them. If you have any suggestions or you want to be a part of one of the podcasts, feel free to reach out to me on leadgenerationworld.com. You can just fill out the contact form there, or you could shoot me an email at mike@leadgeneration.com, and then we can discuss possibly getting you involved. But today we've got a great guest. We've got Dave Gowans from Browser to Buyer. He's a UK-based business that focuses on conversion rate optimization, which is always, at the top of the important list of things to do when it comes to performance marketing and lead generation, and one that sometimes we get a little lazy with as well. We think that the site is perfect and it's performing well enough, and we don't make those changes. So this is a good conversation. Dave's a great guy, and it's awesome to have him on the show. So let's go ahead and bring him on and start talking some conversion rate optimization. All right, welcome to the Lead Generation World podcast. My name is Mike Faree. I've got David Gowans here from Browser to Buyer. He's out there in the UK, so welcome or welcome to the show, first of all.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, and thanks for it's 4 p.m. there. Here it's 9 a.m. So we're on different ends of the day. So I appreciate you sticking around. But really, in this time, everybody's sticking around because they're all working from home, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's the end of a week, but yeah, I'm sure it's all pretty flexible now, isn't
Yeah.
it? So
yeah. So you guys are you guys just recently went on lockdown. We've been I think on lockdown for the last week and a half now. But London and UK are all on lockdown now. Is that right?
that's right. Yeah, I think certainly things are probably affecting London more than anywhere else. But yeah, it's all but essential reasons to go out and a little bit of exercise. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's been a strange week, as I'm sure it has been for everyone.
Yeah, and hopefully we get through it, relatively quickly, and I say relatively because we just don't know what that's going to look like. But so let me just ask you, tell me a little bit about Browser to Buyer and what that is. I know we're going to talk a lot about conversion rate optimization today and what you're up to, but first, tell me a little bit about Browser to Buyer.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're a conversion optimization agency. We've been around since 2016 when I set up the company, but personally, I've been doing this for for many years. Right back to it's probably been 7 or 8 years now. I started building split tests, and then I moved into coming up with the concepts, and then into research and analysis, and sort of that led through various sort of agency positions to setting up my own business back in 2016. So we're a relatively small agency, but we work with we have worked with a lot of companies large and small around the world. There are some big names, people like the Orange mobile phone group across Europe. I've worked with Tottenham Hotspur Football Club in the past. People like the Post Office here in the UK. But generally, it's all sorts of businesses, sites large and small. We work with price comparison sites, publishing sites, financial services, affiliate sites, lead generation, education, all sorts of things. Anyone who has a decent volume of traffic and wants to get more conversions out of it. And basically what we do is we have a sort of expert data-driven approach to conversion optimization. So what we do is we focus on the data. We try and understand what are the things that actually stop your visitors converting. What are their problems? How can we solve them? And then we come up with tests and concepts. And usually that's very successful. I mean, with our clients, we get between sort of a 10 and 30% increase in their conversion rates within the first few months. And many of those clients we go on for many years working with and start testing really interesting things, pricing and products and all sorts of things. So there's a huge variety of sort of clients that we do.
Yeah, that's great. So it's almost a little bit behavioral as well. Well, a lot behavioral, frankly, when it comes to conversion rate optimization. But I'm kind of curious what you think. If CRO or if conversion rate optimization is more of a science or an art.
Oh, it's a difficult one. That it's. I think there's a lot of science there. There is a lot of science there because a lot of it is going to come down to numbers, and it's going to come down to how many people are dropping out at this step, what percentage of the people in this survey said this reason over that reason. But I think there is a lot of art in it as well, both in the sort of the analysis side, but more coming up with the solutions. It's realizing from, say, if people are saying in a survey, I mean, something we always get feedback on, whatever the industry is, price is a problem. The reason I'm not buying is price. I don't like the price. And you could instantly jump to, well, we need to reduce prices, we need to put in discounts. But very often the sort of art part of it comes in, and thinking about, why is price an issue, is it's not necessarily about lowering price or anything like that. It could be about showing more value to the users, or using some sort of clever behavioral economics to make that price seem smaller, whether that's putting it next to a more expensive product, or, all these sort of classical sort of concepts that psychologists have gone in for many years. And then, of course, he's coming up with a sensible way to approach that. And that again does become, it becomes quite an art. You know what to
Yeah.
put on the page, what we should be doing, but coming up with the right ways to do it, that can sometimes be a bit complex.
I love this conversation because a lot of times when we think about conversion rate optimization, we just think about button colors or bullet points or having the form on the right side of the page, like little things like that. But you're really talking about even a deeper art of persuasion versus just a landing page optimization to some extent.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, there was, I think, a nice example. Actually, this many years ago, I worked with a college in the US, and we're doing a test with them around, what was the best way for people to get in touch, and we had all these sort of buttons that said request information, request information. Well, actually, that's not helpful. That's not what people want to do. We don't want to go out and request that you send me the info packs. We went with something softer on the button, which, like you say, is that sort of traditional button stuff. But then it was all about, well, what happens? What information do I get? And we found out that people really wanted information about financial aid, for example, and to know what courses they could get. So then it was just putting into that form, some bullet points. It's not just it was, inquire now, or we'll send you some information, get financial help, this and that. And that was a hugely successful test. So actually, and it's one of the challenges I guess I have with clients quite regularly is sometimes some of the smallest things you change make a big difference, because it's that psychological side of it. We're testing an affiliate, and looking at different headings. Was it best to have this is an outstanding recommendation, this is the best site, this is perfect for this, and finding which one of them has made a huge difference, much more than actually things in the past that we've done, like moving around whole sections of the page. So certainly though, it's sort of those little ones, and people don't like to necessarily test them because they seem like little things, but they're the ones that can really make the big differences.
What's the best way when it comes to testing? I'm thinking just from myself, who, I've got a website obviously for events and all this sort of stuff. What's the best way for a smaller company to be able to split test or test different things on their site? Is there a platform or is there something out there to the public that they could utilize?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think for anyone starting off, I mean, for a small site,
Yeah.
there's usually two. There's two challenges. One is traffic always. To run an A/B test, there's all sorts of statistical calculations you should go through. As a rule of thumb, I would say you want to be doing at least 300 to 600 actions, whatever your main goal is, per month, to try and to effectively split test and have a chance of getting a result. But you should be doing that statistically correctly. So that's the first challenge for a lot of sites. And I can come back to that's not necessarily a stumbling block, but When it comes to tools, I mean, Google Optimize is a good tool, as a free tool as well. My favorite paid tool is a tool called Convert, which is convert.com. And, it's very reasonably priced against the big enterprise split testing tools, but gives you pretty much everything. And, they're extremely helpful. And, I've been working with them for many years, and they're a very good tool to use. So, as I say, very reasonably priced. It's very easy to get into that, whether it's through the free route or through one of these tools. But for many people, fundamentally, that isn't going to be available to them on their site. But still, I would say, you can do things with sort of before and after testing. Where you make the change, note in your analytics system when you did it, and try and look at the differences. And that brings a whole host of problems. Of course, that things might happen, like global recessions that suddenly hit during that time, and you don't know whether or a competitor might do better or worse and things like that. So you don't get the cleanliness of a split test. But if you're making the right changes, the impacts should be big enough that you can see a decent increase in your conversion rate, even when doing it that way.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'm kind of curious. You mentioned, and I hope you don't mind talking about it. You mentioned working for the Hotspurs and their website, and obviously, when I think of football or soccer website, it's extremely busy. It has news, it has shops, it has just a ton ticket information, a ton of things on their website, and it can get probably quite busy. What was it that you were sort of working on with them on their improvement of their site?
So for them, this was a great many years ago. So I can't I can't say too much about their current site. But
Yeah,
certainly when I was working on that, I don't know what it's like. It might be great now. So,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
but yeah, when I was working on it, it was primarily looking at the shop. For them, they're going to sell tickets whatever happens, and they didn't have things like ad revenue weren't particularly important to them. So it was looking at the shop, which is it was an interesting challenge as a business, because in itself it's one of those sites where initially you look at it and you say, well, if you're a fan, you're going to go there and you're going to buy from them. But then you start to find, well, there are lots of competing sporting goods stores, other people selling, the branded products that you're competing against. And then for them, one of the most interesting things was they were working in a very a very sort of international market, where there was a lot of people in the UK, but they have huge followings in other countries where they were at the time, whether they still were the main source of the sort of branded merchandise. So it was really interesting because there were a lot of challenges around, there quite often are with international businesses, around things like currencies and languages. And they're the same challenges I'm working with people today on, even in I mean, given that sites and tools are out there to do all the currency and conversions and things for you, it's still a big issue that there are big differences, in the groups of people coming on the site, and you have to treat them as individual audiences. And when you look over your whole customer base, you might find there are certain countries that will convert very badly, certain countries that convert very well. You can't look at the average across that. You've got to look at those individual groups because of the different ways they act.
And that's a huge complexity, that layer of complexity that I didn't even think about really until you mentioned an international website, and the different behavior of each country or persona or whatever it may be. It's got to. I mean, do you find that people tailor to each persona, or are they really trying to just look at the whole at data as a whole and just do their best across all personas?
I think it depends. It depends on the business, certainly, and how advanced people are getting with with their segmentation and what they're looking at. I mean,
Yeah,
one of the big challenges I always find at the start of a project is understanding where the biggest potential is. So the changes you'd want to make on a site, you want to make the biggest differences up front, and probably they're going to be the ones across the whole site. So I don't know, you want to put in a money back guarantee, or you want to explain why you want people to get in touch, and that works across all
Yeah.
regions. But what you then start to find, I mean, I'm working with a multinational company at the moment, and we're finding that for various reasons, there's very, very different conversion rates in different countries. And we were looking at their affiliate landing pages, and there was a particular country, the overall conversion rate was very low. What we actually found is for countries like the US and Germany and France and things like that, it was performing very well. But there were certain regions where we were getting a lot of sort of low value traffic that was coming onto pages in the wrong language, that that were probably quite low likelihood to buy this product anyway. So
Hmm.
suddenly, it feels like a strange thing that I was going in there and telling them, well, actually, your conversion rate is better than you thought it was, but for these groups. And actually, these ones, yes, the conversion rate is really low here. They're probably not going to buy a lot anyway. Let's get them off the page, or at least take them out of our analysis so that we can focus on, on the right things. So I guess it really depends on where that potential is, and segmenting down is definitely a good thing if you do have that international market. And if there are differences internationally, if you're selling a digital product in English in dollars, you're probably going to do pretty well in most markets in the world. If you're delivering something to, around the world, I work with an e-commerce business where international deliveries were extremely expensive for various reasons, and that was actually absolutely destroying their conversion rate. But so we had to understand, well, how do we treat those international markets as a whole, and how do we treat US and Canadian customers differently? And so yeah, it's really trying to find segmentation may well be the right thing to do, but it's checking that from the data you've got before you sort of go down that route.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that sounds, very, like I said, very complex, to be able to dive in and dig into that data. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. But I'm kind of curious from your point of view, what the sort of the lowest hanging fruit is, or what's the most common error that you see on websites across the board that you go, okay, I'm going to talk with a client. The first thing you look at, is there anything that sort of sticks out?
I think probably there's a sort of general high level answer is probably the first one, which is fundamentally, if I go and look at sites, usually the challenge I see, and it's one that is very, very easy to fall into, is forgetting what the user actually wants and trying to sell what you want to sell. So, whether that's using your industry terminology, for example, or or going back to that case of the education provider, forgetting that what the user wants is to find out a bit more how to get this course, not I want to request information for you because you provide me with an information pack. I don't know your process. I don't fundamentally care how you sort of sign me up, what the lead generation process is. This is what my next step is. So it's a little bit of a it's a little bit of a general point, because it's maybe hard to necessarily identify first of all, but that's where it's quite nice coming in as an outsider. Quite often I go onto a site and I say, well, what are you selling? Or, well, what's the product? What do I need to do? So that's probably the biggest fundamental problem. And the one that makes the biggest difference for a lot of the clients is switching that round and making people think about that. And, looking at how do we present things in the way the user wants. So that's probably the general point. And then the one that's maybe a little bit more tangible is, for many industries, there's just absolutely core things that you can say that will get you more visits. More conversions. I mean, you can go on, these 60 conversion rate optimization ideas, blog posts, and some of these come up, things like social proof, and people drop them on, and sometimes they work well and work badly. But, sometimes it's just the little things that people forget to shout about. So quite often in a retail environment, it's things like free delivery, free returns, getting them up the top of the page. It still works very well. These fundamentals, you have to test them, you have to, try them in the right way. And you know, quite often they will give you small incremental gains, that the bigger changes will probably give you the really big results. But, if you're wanting to make some updates, there are things like that, just thinking about the sort of things that would make you more confident to buy, or to inquire, or whatever it is, and are usually the sort of the starting points.
I think business owners, and I'm going to use myself as an example too, because I feel, we put on conferences here in the US. And then, of course, we've got one in London in October. And one of the things, with the website is I find that we sometimes have too much content on there, right? We're trying to really get everything about the show out there on the site and all this sort of stuff. And then you add on social proof or quotes or all these different things. Um, how do you, it's hard not to get stuck into putting just too much content on a site.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And it's a very difficult thing to do. I mean, even there was a lot. Used to say a lot, in the past around getting stuff above the fold on the page, and fundamentally that still is the big thing. Is 80% of your users won't scroll and won't read that content, so you hit them with something obvious straight off. But what you tend to find with a lot of sites is that it's the people who go in and read that content that end up being the ones that convert. They need to find the right things, and it can get very distracting. But one of the things we tend to do is use heat maps, and for that we tend to use Crazy Egg. The reason being, and people like Hotjar do a great job of many of the aspects of their tool, and I know that's a popular and cheap choice that I'd strongly recommend as well. But one of the nice things that Crazy Egg does is it tracks where on your page people are actually stopping. So if I scroll down from the header and I scroll down and then I stop on your pricing table, for example, then suddenly where the user's information is on the page. And been working with a client recently, and we found exactly that. They had a very long page. They're a co-working space, had a very long page, and you scrolled down, and the place where everybody was stopping and looking were the different plans, as you'd expect. That's the place where their attention was. So the idea is then, if we've got key messages to put on the page, things we really want to get across, put them in that area, put them near the price, because that's where people are focusing. So it's tools like that can start to tell you, what are the sections of the page that the users are interested in, and are they reading, and that then helps you to identify, well, both what's important to people, but also where can you put the key information, and how should you structure it to get the right messages out there.
So the other thought I had too when you're talking is around the initial creation of a website, right, for a new business. And there's so many tools out there, whether it's WordPress or Marketo, whatever it is, that provide user-designed websites, templates. What do you think the approach should be for a new business setting up a new website to sort of get them off on the right foot?
Well, yes, it's a tricky step, because you've got to work out what to put on there, which is which is fine if you've done it a million times, but if it's your first site, or if it's site in a new vertical or a new industry or whatever, that can be quite
Yeah.
challenging. So my best advice, and it's an odd thing, but I'd say go and look at who you want to be like. Go and look at your competitors, because I'm not necessarily saying
Yeah.
mirror what they've got, mirror their
No, that's
design,
good
but at the
advice.
end of the
Yeah.
day, you've that would you could see there what is working for them, and look at the successful people. So when you're setting up in a new industry or a new website, find who is most successful, who do you want to be like in that industry, and work out what they've got on their page, and then also play towards your strengths. So for example, if you've got a load of great testimonials or something like that, play towards that. But if you don't, if you're a new business, you haven't got testimonials and things, well, then that's not the thing to play up. Think about, that just because your competitors have videos of their best clients on the front page, if you can't do that, then don't. Find what helps to sell your experience. Maybe put so yeah, I would definitely say for a new website, look at what you assume is working for other people. And I mean, even for existing sites and sites I go in and look at, I will always go and look at the competitors, not just because I would never assume that your competitor is doing something better than you are, or you should copy any competitors. But you, again, thinking of it from the user's perspective, if I'm going to research, getting a nursing degree online, I will maybe look at 3 or 4 different colleges, and each of them will have standard information. And if my website's totally different, I'm the outlier, and I'm the one that makes it difficult to do a comparison. So, in a way, you want to fit with what your industry is. Of course, you need to bring out your selling points, your unique selling points, and what's different. So it's sort of finding a balance between that, but definitely starting from scratch. Definitely look at what everyone else is
Yeah.
doing, and at least use them as a structure.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. Usually I ask this question at the beginning of the interview, but I didn't ask it. But I'm curious to know, how did you get involved in conversion rate optimization? I think initially, if I remember on your LinkedIn, you were more on the development side. Is that accurate before?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. So I was a computer scientist at university. I then went and I worked as a research scientist, actually researching into television recommendations. This was back when video on demand, before the days when Netflix was sending out DVDs and things like that. But looking into recommendation systems, and then I moved into software development, and then totally by chance I got a role with a company who were one of the first split testing and multivariate testing companies, and building the tests, doing the development. So and it was very exciting because this is 7-8 years ago. It was the really big names we were working with back then who were innovative, and working with them was really interesting. And I was building these tests, and I was like, I'm actually more interested in what are we changing? Why are we that button? Why are we changing that headline? Than I was in making sure that it worked well on Internet Explorer 6 or whatever the the pain point was at that time. So
Yeah.
I sort of transitioned then into. I mean, back then it was very new, and a lot of it there was less of the sort of psychology, a lot less research and data. Back in those days, it was just let's come up with ideas to improve your website. But very quickly, I then realized that not only did I love doing that, but what I really liked was the fact that you could base this on things like science and also things like psychology and that sort of thing, and bring that in. So that was sort of how I got into it, and then it's sort of it's one of those roles that and one of those positions that sort of brings together technical skills, analytical skills, and like you said earlier, a bit of sort of an art and creativity side to it, which is a really nice sort of mix. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So over those 7 years, has anything changed with the approach of conversion rate optimization, or yeah, tell me, how has it evolved, if at all, over the last 7 years?
It's definitely things have become a lot more. Things have become a lot more, I guess, formal. I guess there's a lot more sort of formalized approach to things, and there's a lot more, there's a lot of sort of good data-driven conversion optimization out there. Like I say, back when I started, a lot was just based on what people would call best practice. The fact that this worked for 3 of the biggest retailers in the UK, we're going to try it for you and see if it works too, which as we've said, works to an extent. But I think nowadays most people doing conversion rate optimization and A/B testing, or at least most people who do that in the industry, call themselves conversion optimizers, have a good level of sort of data-driven approach to things. But having said that, I think there are some things that still are true today that were back then. At the end of the day, the fundamentals don't change. There are a lot of really good tools out there now. There are better, cheaper testing tools. You can get one for $200 a month or free. Back then it was £10,000 a month or something like that just for the tool. So that's made things a lot easier. So more people are doing it. But I think still there's a lot of conversion optimization that goes on it's not necessarily that thought through and detailed. And there are still a lot of these tests running that are probably getting small gains, which is good, but there's still a lot of challenges around things like making sure tests are statistically valid, that they're built on strong hypotheses, things like that. So many of those sort of challenges that people had 7 years ago are the same challenges they're facing today.
Yeah. One of the things that kind of stuck out to me when I was thinking about the last 7 years is obviously the rise of mobile use.
Mm.
Obviously, iPhones were what are we? I don't know, 13 years into it now, 12 years, maybe 12 years into iPhones. I'm not sure. But mobile use without any question is continuing to rise. So how does that sort of play into the overall optimization of a website when you're talking about, having it also be optimized for mobile?
Yeah, I mean it's a big challenge, and again, what's quite interesting again over those 7 years, we've seen the change from when we started, it was desktop and we'll just exclude anyone on a small browser. And then it moved to, responsive was the big new thing. And now, of course, a lot of people do mobile first. But it is very challenging because I think still people come on and they treat the idea that, you've got a responsive site, your site should work for any device. It's a great thing. But fundamentally, identification of which device someone's on is a really big identifier of the group they're in. I mean, we were talking about people from different locations internationally. You get a very similar sort of thing. So, for example, um, one of my clients is a company in the travel industry, and nobody buy. You're not going to buy your. I mean, some people do, but there's very, very, very low conversion rate for expensive luxury villa holidays on a mobile device compared to on a. So even with them in a they get about 50% mobile traffic. Everyone goes on the villas. They think they're beautiful. They don't buy them on their desktop device, and so you really need to look at that very carefully, because although your website is responsive, although it should work for everyone, you really, really need to think about what's key for those different users. And it may be that you need a different sort of experience, and even think about different goals for different users. So for example, a few years ago we were working with a vehicle leasing company, and on desktop, we were generating sales inquiries, which was great. On mobile, we realized the most valuable thing to do is to get people to call into their call center, and that was far more valuable. Each of those leads was more likely to be converted. Someone was sitting there with my mobile phone; they could just hit the button and call. So it turned out that those two diverged, and the goals for each of those devices changed. And developers don't like it, managing not necessarily two different sites, but having to manage different experiences on different sites. But if you've run a split test on it, then you can then put forward that argument to say, well, look, it's making us X thousand dollars a year. Do this differently on desktop and mobile. We should do that because that's what the numbers have shown. So
Are
yeah,
companies
it's
able
an
to
interesting one.
are companies able to actually, go beyond just the responsiveness of a website as it, changes screen size? Are companies actually showing different information for mobile users now as well?
Some will, yeah. A lot of it does come down to the ordering. So, if you think about a standard desktop site, you stack it into a mobile
Right.
layer. Now, the ordering you
Yeah.
do of that can be very different, and things like, do you expand areas, or
Ah, okay.
sometimes, how do you present them? But sometimes it does come down to subtle things. And again, I've been working with this a few times recently. You've got things like pricing tables, for example, that work very well on a desktop device. Most people will then just stack the prices on mobile, but then you have to think, can you really compare the plans? So one of the things we've been doing, preparing for a test that's just due to go live in the next couple of weeks, is instead of having sort of those pricing elements stacked up on a mobile device, we've actually made them very narrow with the key information that you can compare. This is the number of sites you can go on from this. This is the number of megabytes or gigabytes of data you get. and then you can expand each of them. But the idea being, those are the key things you need to compare, and you're not going to be able to compare those plans by scrolling up and down on your device.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's thinking about that, and those subtleties can be quite challenging, and often that gets lost because you've designed a table. Well, this is how it turns into a mobile table, and people go straight with that.
Yeah, and I would imagine along with like pricing tables or whatever, also there's a lot more implementation of video on websites, and that probably
Yeah.
poses an issue from a conversion standpoint, and then also a responsiveness standpoint. Is there's a I think there was a belief that video actually helped conversions at some point. What do you think?
I think it does on the right sites, certainly, but it needs to be done the right way. So yes, some sites will do very well with video. Video will work very well. I mean, there was the trend a few years back of explainer videos on every site. I'm not. There are some situations where I
Yeah.
think that is good. I think they work very well for things like testimonials and things like that, and they work very well if you have a product or service that should be demonstrated that way. But I think again, it's thinking about some of the traditional things when you take that onto a mobile device. So if you're going to have that video, you need to make sure, well, first of all, that you're not harming your load speed with that. Make sure you've got subtitles on it. It's a crazy one, but you're on the train, or you're in a quiet place, and you don't want to be you're not going to listen to that video, but just having subtitles, not just or captions, not just available on the video, but there by default, especially on mobile devices. And also, there are great tools out there as well. One of the video platforms, Wistia, they are really, really good because you get all the data about how much of your video does someone watch. Do they watch 10 seconds, 20 seconds on different devices? Do they click? You can have a call to action in your video and understand that. And again, video, like any other element on the page, you should be looking at interactions with that. And even if you're not using a platform like Wistia, you know, track the clicks on those buttons. Is anyone actually playing your video? Do they play it on desktop and mobile, and things like that? And that's what really starts to help you to see what's valuable as well on your site.
So another really big topic, obviously, in the last couple of years is their GDPR. Here, it's TCPA and a couple other acronyms, but virtually the same thing. And now websites are sort of forced to have a pop up and have people accept the cookies and all this sort of stuff.
Mm.
Have you seen that affect on page or landing page conversion in any way?
It's a difficult one. It's a difficult one because there wasn't really much opportunity to test it because most people they knew they had to
Yeah,
do it, and a lot, especially smaller businesses or even big businesses, had you've got a big development backlog. You don't want to be spending time on your cookie things, and things are being
right.
mandated by legal. We'll just put in whatever it is. And I think, I mean, certainly that's been around. So the cookie messages have been around in Europe now for probably 2 or 3 years, and I think people just ignore them. They click accept. So if I
So
was
it's
putting on
normal
my
now.
sorts
Yeah,
of,
yeah,
it's normal now, which doesn't mean you can't improve on them. So actually, one of my clients, we realized, it was things like, and again, I'd have to put the disclaimer, speak to your legal department about what is acceptable. But things
sure.
like, for example, Amazon or someone will put up the message. It says accept. If you don't accept it, but you carry on using the site, some sites will keep on prompting you over and over. Many sites will just take that is implicit acceptance, which it depends if anyone's going to get into trouble for that. Again, I'm not giving legal advice, but it's things like that, or subtleties like, what can you actually see on the screen? Sometimes, because you're the site owner and you never see these things because you've clicked accept months and
Yeah,
months ago, you haven't realized that your 10% discount and your accept your cookies and your this is our current sale appear all over the screen and nobody sees your products. So it is important to go back and look at those things and say, not so much, it's not going to be so much of a barrier because everyone has to do it, but are you actually covering up the really important information on your site by having that there? And mean, we still talk about, a false bottom on a page, especially on mobile. It looks like there's nothing worth scrolling for, and you can make that worse. You might have designed really well so that you don't have a false bottom, but then once your cookie pop-up comes up, you've lost it. So yeah, there's still a lot to be done with them, and it is really worth just spending the time and thinking,
Yeah.
what does the new user see?
I'm just thinking. I don't know how much you work in WordPress or not, but is there do you know if there's a plugin for this type of cookie type of pop up, or is it something that has to be hard coded in? This is actually a personal question.
And they probably are. I know there's a lot of people who have them. There's I can't remember any off the top of my head, but there are very easy tools that, even if it's not a WordPress plugin, it's very easy to just drop into the
There
active
is.
code screen
Okay.
or something like that. So there's a lot of
Okay.
people who've done very simple, and they're quite nice implementations. In a way, I'd almost recommend go out and find one of those that have done it, because they're probably, at least they're learning from thousands of websites, and you're hoping they've actually optimized that to some extent, rather than, if you go off and try and build your own, or something like that, you can skip the worry of legal compliance, you can skip the worry of getting it to work.
Yeah.
There's some really nice solutions out there. So yeah, it's
Yeah,
something that
I'll
should
have
be
to I'll
quite
have to Google
straightforward
it.
to.
The other thing that along these same lines with regards to accessibility of a website, and I know we're kind of veering off a little bit from conversion rate optimization, but when it comes to accessibility for disabled or hard of hearing, and all these sorts of things, is that something that you generally see companies taking into consideration too, or is that still early? I know here in the U.S. it's not being considered all that much, but the government has created regulations for companies to start taking that into consideration, and there are fines for websites that are not
Mm.
accessible for the hearing impaired and that sort of thing. What's it like over there?
To be honest, I'm surprised this isn't a bigger focus of a lot of companies. I haven't heard of anyone, like I say, I haven't heard of anyone being fined for it. I haven't heard of anyone, recently even getting into trouble for it. And I expect a lot of that has come from the fact that the tools who are out there for people who are, who are blind or hearing impaired, screen readers, the fact that there's automatic captioning on a lot of videos and things, probably overcomes that. But of course, that that is a huge, and for certain, depending on your site, of course, that's could be a huge part of your market. So, not only is it the right thing to do to be making your site accessible to people, and there are not only are there great tools out for them to use, there are great tools out there that you can use on your own site. Like, there are even things like just checking the contrast of text is enough, or simulators for color blindness and things like that. That if you're doing a redesign, or even if you're doing a split test or making some changes, it's definitely worth running them, both from the perspective of it is the right thing to do, but also, if 5-10% of your market, for example, if you're working with in areas that target older, the older population, then things like screen text size, contrast, things like that are very, very important. And from a conversion optimization point of view, these are your customers, you should be providing what they want. So and it's a quick win as well, in a way. If you can make life easier for 5 or 10% of your users, that's great. And hopefully it gives you that competitive advantage as well. So it is commonly overlooked, and unless generally with companies I've worked with, unless they are specifically, they either have someone who's championing that area, or specifically focus on a market, where there's a high proportion of people who need that sort of assistance, then it gets overlooked far more than it should do.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So you work with a lot of companies across the world, right? I mean, international companies and the such. One of the things we always like to do is try to figure out, at least provide information on people how to get a hold of you. I mean, we've dived only surface level into a lot of different things here in the last 40 or 50 minutes now. But if someone wants to reach out to you and really dig in and ask you more questions and look at hiring, you're obviously open to international business as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I've worked with companies all over the world, and do at the moment. Whether you serve internationally across many places, or just local markets. We work with all sorts, and I'm always happy to talk to people
Yeah,
about their conversion optimization questions, even if you're not necessarily looking to work with someone like ourselves. I can help to point in the right direction and things like
great.
that. So
So,
always happy to
so,
have that
so how would they
conversation.
get a hold of you?
So the website is browser2buyer.com. That's browser to buyer.com. And yeah, got a form to fill in there, or I'm Dave.Gowans at browser2buyer.com if anyone wants to drop me an email.
So is your website kind of like a graphic designer's website, which is, generally not optimized, or is it dialed in?
um,
What's that
it's
saying? Like
it's
the,
well.
graphic designers or whatever, web designers generally have the worst websites, right? Because they never have time to work on it on their own.
Exactly. Well overdue a redesign. Certainly, it is. But having said that, it's served us well for a while. But
Good.
yes, if you're expecting something flashy and exciting, you probably won't get it. But hopefully, it has all the key information that
and
someone who is
hope
interested in conversion optimization would look for.
Yeah, and hopefully it converts well. So, um, I appreciate you hopping on the this webinar with me today and this podcast. And hopefully, if anybody has any questions, reach out to Dave personally. And I hope to maybe circle back with you maybe in a few months. Hopefully, after all this coronavirus stuff gets done, and we have a show in. London, and frankly, to be honest with you, I'd love to get you involved in that conference as well, because this is a very important part for performance marketers and marketers in general. But conversion rate optimization is at the top of the list. So let's be sure to connect on that item as well.
Absolutely, it's been a pleasure to talk to you about it, and would certainly love to get involved. Like you say, it's often overlooked, and you know who knows how things will go, but in challenging times, getting the best value out of your traffic is the best thing to do. And it's the gains are there for sites large and small. So definitely, I'd recommend if you have some spare time, if you're at home at the moment, don't know what to do on your website, have a look at think about your users and what you can do to improve it, because yeah, there's lots to be improved.
Great. Well, thanks for joining me, David. We'll talk to you next time.
That's great.